Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. Thank you for joining our conversation today. We are going to briefly go over what a therapeutic agreement looks like, a therapeutic reconciliation, questions and planning agreement, whatever you want to call it. Basically, these are the questions that each individual in the relationship with their own individual person, like we talked about last week, why it's so important to do this with someone along the way to help you go through these questions and assess for yourself the why. We're going to go over those questions today with you, talk a little bit about what that might look like, give you some ideas. I know that when my clients get a hold of this, sometimes it feels very overwhelming to the brain. So we're hoping that offering you this and going through these questions and giving maybe some possible answers or what some possibilities to these answers can look like really starts to get your brain going a little bit. All right. So, the very first question on here, the thing to consider is what are the goals? What are the goals for reconciliation? If we're separated, whether that is in house, out house of separation, what needs to happen in order to come back together as a couple?
I like that it starts here because at first it's what are the goals for reconciliation? You're like, I'm just trying to figure out why are we separating? But I think of what do I need to have happen within me, within my partner, or within the way we interact for whatever my reason was of why I needed to separate to have some progress or movement forward. So a
I
goal
want
could
everyone to like go back and like rewind that and play that again. That was really, really beautiful.
thank you. And I have no idea what I just said, but one thing about that, or one of those things could be is my goal is for us to have reconciliation is I want to be able to come back together as a couple. That is my goal.
Yeah.
And it may not be, but that could be one of your goals of I want to be able to come back. Or I want to be able to have a marriage where we show each other respect. Or I want to have levels of honesty between me and my partner. I want us to be able to be connected, not just sexually, but emotionally and spiritually and mentally. Oh, that's funny. I'm looking at the list. We have notes in it. I didn't even know this was on here. I was going off my brain, but to share all levels of intimacy, psychological, verbal, emotional, spiritual, intellective, cognitive, and physical. Yeah. I think to figure out where we're headed, we to put that in our GPS. So we're not just wandering all over the desert, hoping that at some point we'll cross paths again with our partner. It's no, what is it we are working towards? And I don't know if you do this, Amy. Maybe we should have talked about this first, but when I have a couple who is separating with a therapeutic separation, I send this worksheet to both of them to think about these questions. But when we have betrayal, I really do lean more heavily on my betrayed partner of what do they need for safety.
Yep.
So while I have both of them do the work to think about what these goals are, I'm really leaning towards that betrayed partner.
Oh, for sure. I know that I'll give this to my clients long before I even have them mention it to their partner, or when I'm working with like Luke's working with the betrayer partner and I'm working with the betrayed. Yeah, I don't even have Luke start that process with his client at that point to because I think that just being able to stop and pause long enough to just do this one question, right, can really feel daunting. It can just all of this can really feel daunting when you're just so disassociated and emotionally dysregulated.
Well, and two, the grief and mourning that can come up.
Yeah.
That this is what I thought we had, or this is where I thought we were headed, or this is what I really wanted, and this is where I'm at. There's a lot of times just a lot of grief and mourning that has to be done, even sitting with this question of where are we going?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the goals, being able to assess what your goal is for that reconciliation, or if it is to do a trial run of a divorce. There's legal separations we talked about in our first episode, and on this, that can also be something where it's like, okay, we're both leaning towards divorce. Let's see what this even looks like. And so that very first question really helps clarify, I think, a lot of things. Okay, the second question is the estimated length of the separation. So how long we want to, especially if we're doing this to reconcile, we do want to have a date. Otherwise, it really can become too comfortable as you are alone and living separate lives. If we don't have a time frame in mind, kind of defeats the whole, I think it defeats a lot of the purpose if we're trying to the goals reconciliation.
Well,
So, what's an average time that you give clients or suggest?
well, I don't. I have a time frame, but I don't. And let me explain what I do. I think that we have a time frame that we reassess where we're at. Because if I say we're going to be separated or we're looking at a separation and it's for 2 weeks, the amount of people who can white knuckle it or just play a part for a short period is most humans can do that. And even I have some who could do it for a good 6 months. And I'm not what I really want is this period is not to put on a show during this period, but this to be an opportunity to really dive in and do some good work. And I like having a period of time when we reassess where we're at. We reassess if we can start looking at maybe coming back together a little more in reintegration, or we reassess of this is exactly what I need. I need to have this longer, or I assess of I'm actually not having any change. Do we need to do anything different? Me, myself, internally, not necessarily our partner, right? Because we're not doing this to change them.
Right.
But my dates vary even like client to client of how long. Because for some, doing a week separation for them is life altering. And that's about all that they can and want to handle. And that's okay. And for some, 3 months really is a wise time to reassess. And for some, there is so much extensive damage that we really do need to look longer and look at in 6 months, we're going to reassess. I feel bad for not giving something a little more specific, but it really depends.
I know. No, that's the answer I expected you to give. And I think that, again, yeah, that can be hard to hear. But you said something, I think it was in our last episode, you said something that I am just going to add here too, to trust yourself. And you have the right to change your mind. So
Yeah.
even if you feel like 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, and you set that date, and then that date approaches and you want to change your mind and extend it, you have that right. So I think one thing I'll just add with the estimated length question, if you are feeling pressure to nail down a date and that's creating some anxiety, just remind yourself that you have the right to change your mind.
I love Vicky Tillwell's Palmer's Bill of Rights. We play
Oh.
it often. If you haven't read them ever or read them recently, Google Vicky Tidwell Palmer Bill of Rights. And yeah, you have the right to change your mind. You have the right to adjust. When you're looking at the estimated length of separation, notice the word estimated length of separation. We do get to change and be flexible.
Absolutely. Okay, number 3, what benchmarks or goals need to be met or practiced in order for reconciliation to be considered? Again, this is for you individually, and that's why you and I both were saying we like to give this to our betrayed partners first. You are the one who was betrayed. Being able to assess what you need to see happen in yourself and that last part, in order to consider reconciling with the betrayed partner, what do you also need to see? So I think that one kind of covers 2 parts. Alana, what are some examples of benchmarks and goals?
Well, it's interesting because I would have, and I think the majority of my partners would be, well, I need to see him do this and this and this and this. And the whole list would be all about him. Right.
Mhm.
But then I'm going to read some of these that are listed here, and you're going to just listen to me read because I'm the one with the microphone. I want you to listen to these and notice how little he is actually involved or your partner is actually involved. So, are our marital goals aligned? Are we now headed in the same direction? Am I well connected to God? Am I ready to give to the marriage and not just receive? Do I have alarms in place to know when I need to retreat for safety? Am I courageous? Am I practicing having a voice more? Am I psychologically fortified? Am I feeling charity? Am I free of anger, blame, impatience, or resentments? And side note, you won't always be anger free of these things, but are you noticing that you're able to emotionally stay grounded more? Am I able to, when I'm in their presence, that I am able to stay emotionally regulated? Do I have a plan for myself of how to keep myself emotionally strong? Do I see and feel that we're working together instead of just independently? So you see, as I've been reading these, a lot of this is looking at ourselves and going back to one of our older episodes on safety, where we talk about this safety. And if we only put our safety in their bucket, that then we're still so volatile if they're even remotely volatile.
Mhm.
And so benchmarks and goals, while there are some relational pieces that absolutely they'll be involved in, I would love for you to really look internally at yourself and what do I need? What can I do? Where am I at? What's happening in my body?
100%.
Power lies.
Yeah, love it. Number 4, state the financial plan during this time. Now, this one, like we mentioned with Luke, where you might be concerned or overly functioning for him to figure out how is he gonna make this work financially. I think this one is, again, a little bit trickier, but I'm just gonna echo what you just said there, Alana, to when you're figuring this one out, try really hard to assess this in terms of what are the needs of the family during this time and how are the needs of the family going to be met during this time? Not so much, let me figure out how I can we're going to financially make this happen for him to be able to go somewhere else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And not coming up with a plan, not figuring that out for him,
Mhm.
letting him be an adult who is facing the natural consequences of his choices and letting him figure out the piece.
Yeah. It's part of the work. Him being able to figure that out as part of his recovery work. And so we don't want to enable their ability because they are capable. Number
Yeah.
f- Oh, sorry. Is there anything more you wanted to say to that one? Okay. Number 5, each partner states clear expectations of what needs to happen to visit each other's living spaces. So if you're doing an in-house separation, you still clearly want to define what areas of the house are yours and your space, designated your space, and what spaces of the house are designated mutual spaces. Even if the kitchen, I there was a couple I worked with, their kitchen, they had times. I get the kitchen between this time and this time, and you get the kitchen between this time and this time. The living room we can share at this time. So you can get very specific here. This can look however you want, but I just want to offer you some ideas to consider when you're like, what does that even look like? If you're in house, if your space is the guest bedroom or the master bedroom, what are the rules? What are the expectations around that partner entering your safe space?
Well, yeah. And one I just love is as simple as knocking. You don't enter the door without knocking and being invited in. Whether we're in house separation or out of house separation, we don't enter people's that space without that invitation first. That that one I notice a lot is really important for the betrayed partner to help their body get regulated because they're not worried about someone coming in. And it's also the one that I see the other partner forget the most,
Mm,
that they're just so used to just walking in the bedroom
mhm.
or just walking in the front door. and respecting that space and respecting them and giving them that place to heal is a great gift you can give.
It
An
really
important thing
is.
to ask for yourself.
It really is because when your central nervous system is so hijacked and you are living in a constant trauma response, even knocking on the door can create a shock. Honest to goodness, because I've been doing some early childhood trauma stuff, my system started to get activated again and every little noise, every little whatever was hijacking me. I mean, just, when the kids walked out the door and slammed the door, I would gasp. Me being in the bathroom, we have these 2 big doors, and when you open it, it makes a jarring noise. And I finally had to tell Scott, I'm like, "I gotta have you just lightly knock on the door before you walk in to I know your bathroom, but I need that because every time you open those doors and it makes that noise, I my system literally responds into trauma." This is where knowing what you need to create the safety that this separation is providing and be very specific in making those requests are important here.
Can I add one thing? It's okay to make requests as you go.
Yeah.
Meaning you don't have to have all of your triggers figured out now.
Yeah.
You know, Amy's been married to Scott. Scott's not the one who caused the trauma for quite a while, but you're recognizing here's this area that really could make a difference and help me out.
Yeah.
And so I just want to give you permission that you don't have to have all of them and we can add to this. So just pay attention to what you need for that.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is state specific plans for visits, days, dates, or other contact between each other. And so this is looking at your schedule Monday through Sunday, Sunday through Saturday, whatever. Looking at your schedule through the week and identifying, especially when you have kids, what are those things that we need to do, who's doing what and when, and getting a little bit more clear folds into the next question too is when will time be spent with kids? So essentially a parenting plan. Who's going to take kids when, especially if we have out of house separation. One partner's living in a whole different space and they want time with the kids too. So you're coming together and please, 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 please do not involve the kids in these decisions. Do not ask the kids, what would you like? Who do you want to? This is your, as adults, decision to make and come to agreement. And this is, again, why you're going to seek professional help to help you decide this. So it doesn't turn into an argument. But this isn't something that the kids get to be involved in. We want to protect them from stuff like this. So that's why you're answering the questions and you're coming up with the plan around who takes who, when, and practices and all of that good stuff.
And even just hearing this question or sitting down with this question can bring up a lot of feeling.
Mhm.
And so give yourself space to feel whatever you need to feel and process through whatever you need to process through. And that reminder too that it doesn't necessarily have to be the beginning of the end because sometimes brains will go, oh my gosh, like if I even put this down on paper or plan this, well, this is what it's going to be.
Right.
This is just what it's going to be forever. And not the case.
Right.
What we're doing is just trying to set you up and help you think through all of the steps.
Yeah. And the truth is that when the children have a plan, they know what that plan is and how it's going to impact them. That's really all they want to know. Their systems just need to know what's the schedule, how is this going to impact me, and what do I need for the trip? Whatever that looks like. I know I've shared this before, but I remember I think like the first year we got married, I went into one of my little stepchild's rooms and he was feeling sad and I asked him, I said, what feels really hard about going back and forth to 2 homes? And I was really expecting something a lot different than this, but his little answer was, "Well, it's just really, really hard to get my backpack up into dad's big truck." Like, that was the hardest thing for him about going back and forth. So, I think here too, try not to assume that your children are gonna be devastated in areas that you think they're gonna be devastated in. That actually gave me really great insight and helped me to self-check, like, I can't project what I think these kids are experiencing when this little dude just needed help getting his backpack in the big truck, and he was fine. So, Just wanted to throw that out there too. The next one is what will be told to family and friends during this process. So, ideally, I know this doesn't always happen, and one person decides to say something to the kids without you knowing or going against, even if you have this planned out, they'll say something. All you can do in any of this is control you and control your narrative and your emotions. But ideally, yeah, it would be great to be able to have a narrative of what you're telling other people and especially children.
For sure. And the ideal is that you and your partner have the exact same narrative.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And we're going to stick with facts. Very simple. Keep it simple. All right. The next one is state the specific recovery commitments as individuals and to repair the marriage. So, examples are the expectation of counseling, recovery programs with groups or sponsors, check ins. What do those things look like specifically that will help repair doing your individual work and the marriage work? What are some examples that come to mind for you, Alana, on that one?
Ways that you're doing counseling, or if you're in groups, or just what are some of those active things that you're doing, those dailies, or those things that you're committing to do during this time that keep
Mhm.
you moving forward as an individual? I think that this one really is important for the person who has betrayed to create a really solid recovery plan and a really solid safety plan that keeps them safe and then in turn keeps their partner safe, especially during a separation, because a lot of extra fears and insecurities come up when the partner who has been betrayed can't see up close more of what is or isn't happening.
Totally. I was gonna just say that. This is where I feel like a lot of the trust stuff is happening here. You're really watching the feet. You can make a request. You can say, "Here's what I would like to see. I'd like to see you do individual work, weekly, plus the group," whatever you would like to see. Remember, it's just a request, but also make sure that you're assessing what you're committing to yourself during this time as well.
Next one is stating spiritual considerations. What in the world does that mean? I This one can look so different, but I think it's being really aware for you spiritually because our spiritual health is very much part of our emotional, mental, physical health. And so looking at spiritually, what do you need to stay grounded and anchored into this area of your life during the separation would be an important piece to look at. And then our next one is stating specific physical boundaries. So you covered some of those up above, but I will not be physically intimate. I need you to knock when you enter the door. I am not open to hugging. I am open to hugging, but I'm not open to kissing. I cannot be in the same room as you right now. I want to be in the same room as you, but I don't want to be physically touching. Just physical boundaries of what you need during this time. And again, you have the right to change your mind, and we will assess at a future date as well. So we can shift or change those as needed.
Yeah. And a lot of those boundaries are also communication boundaries. If you are separated, but now you're being infiltrated with a bunch of text messages, that's not helpful either. I can speak to that one too. Or just for, oh my gosh, years, just the ding of a text was triggering
Mhm.
because that boundary wasn't being respected. So, any of these specific boundaries during the separation, very, very important to clearly identify and communicate with the other person.
Well, for sure. And the next one goes even more into what we're saying. And it's stating specific communication boundaries, including text, email, phone, and stating a plan for the hard conversations, how we're going to communicate around those, and how are we going to communicate around just family logistics.
Yep.
So these boundaries are going to be so individualized. I'll just say go back to our old episodes on boundaries if you need some help determining how or what those can look like. But yeah, because I feel like we could go forever on this. but really getting specific about those communication boundaries and family logistics and hard conversation.
Yeah, I see it really quickly. I do see a lot of confusion around this. I think sometimes most partners err on the side of allowing a lot of that communication, even though it's triggering. One of the communication boundaries that I have seen most helpful, honestly, is email. And maybe starting with that and knowing that, again, you can change your mind, but starting with an email communication and then here are the things that I will only communicate about at this time. So being very clear, like Brene says, is very kind. Okay. And the last one is state when you will be planning your couple check in. This one I think is really important because, again, if we're separating and not having times of connecting, now you get to determine what that connection looks like. And that's what this last piece is. But if the goal is to reconcile, then during the separation, we do want to clearly define what connection does look like. Maybe that's just going on a walk and not talking about the relationship, talking about other things, seeing if we can even have a conversation about other things. A lot of couples need to do a check-in to see, how are you doing with your acting out? How are you doing with those very specific recovery commitments to yourself and the coupleship? You get to decide what that looks like for you.
I love that. And it may be that initially you need to not have a check in for a period of time.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
say, you know what, I need to not have a check in the first 2 weeks, and then we can do a 20-minute check in or a 10-minute check in or an hour check in. It's again so individualized. And as we have gone through this, you can't account for every possible situation that might arise during the separation. You don't have a magic crystal 8 ball. Is that what it's called?
Magic 8 ball.
Magic 8 ball. Thank you. You don't have a magic 8 ball, a crystal ball, seeing the future. So give yourself room to not have all the answers. Give yourself room to not know how it will go down and to not see everything ahead, but to give yourself room with the information I have today to the best of my knowledge. This is what I need. And then again, I have the right to change my mind. So I feel like this one could be a little overwhelming. Like I'm even feeling a little bit of that, like after this. And so be just really gentle with yourself as you're looking at this. And for some people, you may go through all of this and go, you know what? I actually don't want a separation. And you may go through all of this and go, oh my word, I need this so bad.
Mhm.
And no matter where you are in that spectrum is absolutely okay. But this is a tool for greater self awareness. And then if you do choose to move forward with the separation, a tool to help you navigate it with as much eyes wide open as we can.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, okay, well, next week we have Luke with us talking about reintegration after separation. And so, as always, thanks for hanging out with us. And we look forward to seeing you next week.